Okay, here we go. Thanks everyone so much for coming today. I hope I got some good material and we're all going to learn something from each other. Today I really want to talk about commissions, and I want to talk about how we defend our commissions and overcome objections. And the basis for that, I want to start with our listing agreement, and I want that to kind of be the basis for our arguments, because let's face it, it's not always easy to go out there and get 3% for ourselves for a new listing. There's competition. There's family members who wants discounts. There's repeat clients who we feel like deserve a discount for continually using our services. There's all sorts of issues out there that are in the way of us getting 3%. And so I want to reaffirm why we get that and maybe share some examples of how we overcome objections and whatnot. First, I do want to say, I'm going to share my screen, and I do want to show you something real quick. I want to point this out before we get any further. All right, you should see the exclusive right to sell now. This is just a reminder, and then we're going to quit sharing the screen. The reminder is paragraph 2.1. The seller's brokerage fee. If, during a listing period, the company, the seller's agent, the seller, another real estate agent, or anyone else locates a party who is ready, willing, and able to buy, lease, or exchange the property, or any part thereof, at the listing price or terms stated on the data form, or any other price and terms to which a seller may agree in writing, the seller has negotiated with and agrees to pay the company a brokerage fee in the amount of such gross acquisition price plus $195 brokerage fee. If the seller agrees to an unrepresented buyer or limited agency, only one of the following additional fees may be applied if completed. Otherwise, and or below are not applicable. So this is your hopefully more than annual reminder that when we negotiate for listings, our primary objective is to negotiate our fee for listing the property. And I know you're like, of course it is, Mike. But what I'm really saying it in the context of, I still feel like agents are negotiating their listing fees in the context of buyer compensation as well. So in addition to the listing fee, they're negotiating a buyer's fee as well. And so so I'll repeat a couple of things for effect. Our primary concern is the fee we receive for listing the property, which we want you to negotiate a 3% fee. And, when this rolled out, when all the changes were made, we made a big deal of the buyer's compensation. And this is your hopefully more than once a year reminder that the buyer's compensation, we need to have a very serious discussion about it because it's an important part of your marketing, but we're not negotiating that for us. That's not for us. And yeah, it's an important part of your marketing, but there's nothing set in stone, right? And when we put an amount in the buyer's compensation part of that listing agreement, which we're going to review the whole thing in its entirety, that's not a guarantee for anybody. It's an amount up to the amount that the seller wishes. It's an amount up to what the seller is wishing, okay? So think about the language that we're using when we negotiate this situation. If we put too much emphasis on the buyer's compensation, we're potentially subtracting from our value as a listing agent and what we're requesting as our compensation. And also remember that if you put too much emphasis on negotiating a buyer's compensation fee, you're putting emphasis on something that is not set in stone. You're putting emphasis on something that isn't guaranteed at all. And depending on the offer, could literally be zero. So, again, for the third time, our first and most important priority is to negotiate our fee. And so my recommendation is that we should go out there and we should talk exclusively about what our fee is and why we charge it. And once we come to terms on that, Then we head down to the other sections and we talk about unrepresented buyers, limited agency, and then we get to the buyer's compensation and we can have an important discussion about why it's important, but remind our seller that that is not set in stone and that we can evaluate the buyer's compensation on a per offer basis in the context of the terms of the offer. With that being said, I would like to hear from everybody what they think about that strategy, if they like it, if they don't like it, and what you're actually seeing out there, and maybe share some experiences about what you're doing and how those conversations are going with your sellers. Because I'm seeing, here's what I'm seeing that is really sparking this conversation. In the few times that we are discounting our commissions, I'm seeing a split, an even split. And I know that there is a long-standing tradition in the brokerage community, I won't say the brokerage, the realtor community, of like the attitude that, I'm splitting this. Whatever commission I get, I'm splitting. That's no longer the case. That is no longer the case. And I get where that old tradition sort of applied. That, I'm going to negotiate an entire fee. I'm going to split it right down the middle and share it with the other agent because they're helping sell this property. I get it. Those days are over. And in fact, they're over because a massive lawsuit said that's not okay. So not only should we not be having the mindset of that we share commissions of any sort, because we don't, it's not the correct attitude to have. And in fact, you shouldn't even say it. It's up to the buyer's agent now to negotiate their fee, not our job to negotiate their fee whatsoever. And in fact, it's inappropriate. Okay? So when you're going to battle for your commission, keep that in mind, that I don't have to negotiate for what the seller is going to offer the buyer. That's their problem. It's sort of my problem in it's part of an overall marketing plan. It's sort of my problem. But the buyer's agent negotiates their own fee. That's their problem. And it's their problem to present a reason why we should pay them that much. Remember that. Kimberly. Linda says, pretty easy peasy. Kimberly says, I would love to share a recent experience. Kimberly.
Okay, thanks. I turned my video off because I'm eating this delicious salad. Look at this, everyone. Yum. Anyways, so I thank you so much, Mike, for going over this. I wish this would have happened like a week ago because I had a list. So they found me on realtor.com. This was a cold lead. I got a call from an agent in another state who said, I believe, Kimberly, that your vibe, and everything I've researched about you is the right person to list my parents' home. And so she was my advocate. We went, built a good relationship with her parents. Julie and I both went. I brought her on because she's really good at staging. And I just wanted to, because I was going to ask for a 3%, and I wanted to show that we had the best team to take this listing. So she was interviewing discount agents as well. She interviewed 3 agents. We won the listing, but then here's how we lost it. So we won it. I was there signing papers with them. I was super excited that we won it. We'd gone up against some heavy competition. And then as we're signing the listing agreement, I literally had half the documents signed, wet signed. And then, and I explained I went through every page and I explained everything to them. And then they say, we want to exclude one person from the listing agreement. And then I'm like, oh crap, like I don't know how to deal with this. So I called Will and asked, his advice and everything, and then talked to them after I talked to Will about it. And then they just decided, because the person who wanted to buy the house, who they've already talked to, was number one, a family member. They decided not to list with her because she's not an expert. And they'd had a conversation with her that morning. And then number two, she's an agent herself. And they ended up selling the house to that family member because they felt like they would net the most. Now, I went over, we're going to net you the most in the least amount of time with the least amount of legal risk. But if I would have been better prepared because I love how you said that's not my job to, because I explained to them it is in your best interest to cast the widest net. And that's why we would recommend that you do up to 3%. But I think I could have emphasized it more and said, and if that's going to net you less, then, we can. I just think I could have been better prepared. So thank you for bringing this up. I will do much better next time. They ended up selling it to the family member for,
That's
I don't even
rough.
know what. I know. So anyway, there it is.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I think, for so long, so many of us had the habit of talking about our commission, the output, the potential expense of commissions as one line item for the seller. And from their perspective, I get why we would do that. But in this new world, we can no longer do that, and we need to lean into one of the benefits of that. And the benefit of that is, well, you're hiring me, and so let's just negotiate my fee. And then we sort of have to worry about a buyer's agent compensation, but the great part is in this new world, we can evaluate it on a case-by-case basis. So let's talk about that later. I'll explain why that's important later. Let's focus on why you should hire me for 3%. Okay? And so we talk about these individual circumstances one at a time in detail. So we talk about why they should hire us for 3%. Come to terms. Then let's go down to the next section. Unrepresented buyer. These, and you could say, Mr. and Mr. Seller or whatever, it's becoming more common that unrepresented buyers come to the table. But you know what? It's better that we negotiate this ahead of time so you know what that scenario looks like. And I think you'll be more comfortable if we negotiate this fee ahead of time and it's this amount. And then, okay, now let's move on to the limited agency and what that looks like. Do you even want to do it? Here's what it is. And if that occurs, I think it's probably worth about the same amount of money, or maybe it's worth more or less depending on my own perspective. How do you feel about that? All right, next, great. We're done. Let's talk about, your potential expenses, because we don't want to put that in stone. It's correct for us to say, we don't know what you're going to pay a buyer's agent. We don't know. But what we're talking about is what we're going to tell agents when they call us, what we're willing to pay. Because that's the correct way to phrase it. And if we are still resulting or we're still reverting to back to bad habits, and agents are calling Berkshire listing agents and saying, what are you offering? And we're telling them 2.5% or 3%, we're wrong. We are not offering that. You are not offering those amounts. Thank you, Linda. We are offering up to those amounts. It's a very, very, very different scenario. And let me paint you we all know how different it is, but think about, I just watched a MKBHD tech video on this issue, and if you know, you know. Anyway, he's a tech reviewer. He's my favorite tech reviewer. And almost every technology company out there no longer states what their metrics are for their technology and what the output is and what the specifications are. They say up to an amount. And so if you're reading that, it's not good for you because you're like, well, what is it? I don't know. Well, that's how a buyer's agent should feel when you tell them that answer. Depends on your offer. That's the service that we're providing the seller. And if we use stronger language, which is we are offering this amount, that's not a benefit to your seller, and you're doing them a disservice, in my opinion. So does anybody have anything to add to that? Anything to contribute? Otherwise, we'll review our listing agreement. I feel like we do need to review our... Yeah, take it away, Linda.
I just think if you do explain it, this is if in the initial conversation you say I'm a 3% agent. And then as you're going through the document, and I have it turned in front of them, and you're going through each thing and you say all of those things that you said, and you explain everything that you do and everything that's going to happen when you're in each of these other instances. I say, how much do you want the brokerage to get paid if there is an unrepresented? And they'll say, well, gosh, you're going to be doing a whole lot of work. That's twice as much work. So it's 3. And then the next one, what do you want me to do? If it's a limited agent, I'm juggling this. I'm kind of at a little bit of a compromised position, not compromised, but I'm limited because I'm hearing this on both sides, but I can't share with you everything and I can't share with them everything. It's a tough spot to be in. What do you want me to get paid in that instance? Well, 3. Okay. Well, what do you want to do on the buyer? And they're like, well, they're working for the buyer. 3. And I'm like, do you want to do 3? Because they can ask, but if they've got it set for lower, so that could be lower. I don't think it's that hard if you're explaining.
I totally agree with you. I think the difficulty is around old habits and the perception of, and the persistent perception that we've had for, and some of us have had it for a few decades, of how we distribute and talk about commissions. And thanks for telling you, because it does bring up a subject I only touched on briefly when we started this call, which was I have heard many times in my career the frustration and the sense of betrayal of a listing agent who you get to a closing table and the listing agent took more than the buyer's agent. That's in the old world, I would hear that. Okay, no one has that perception anymore. But the culture still sort of persists in that there's some weird expectation that those things should be equal. No. That's their problem. We get paid what we negotiate. The other party, it's their problem. It has nothing to do with us. And so, focus on yourself and your relationship with your client. That's what we negotiate. Not the entire outlay of what their expense is. Break it up. Like, who cares if I make double what the buyer's agent made? It's none of my business. That's their business. I focus on mine and what I get paid for my service. What you get compensated as a buyer's agent is your problem. And of course, when the shoe's on the other foot and we're the buyer's agent, it's still our problem. Okay? And I don't care what your listing agent gets paid. It's none of my business. I'm focusing on my relationship with my buyer, what I've negotiated with them, and what we put in their offer and what it looks like. Okay? And if you think about it, the lawsuit, if you didn't like it and you thought it was unjust, fine. There's lots of it I disagreed with, but they did point that out. That there was sort of an unholy, unspoken alliance in that situation where we're just sort of leaning on each other to get compensated. And that's not okay. And we're in a competitive business. And so we should go out there, we should sell our services, and we should justify it. That's not hard, right? And
that's what I was going to say. I said, if you're not really doing all of these things that you said you were going to do for them, and you did a 3%, I think that's a problem. You need to show up as a 3.
Yeah, I totally agree. And so, don't, if somebody calls you out or they say, how much is I don't know that anybody's doing this anymore. I feel like it's sort of, that little element might be dissipating, but I guarantee it's still out there. And if somebody wants to ask you what your compensation is, another buyer's agent, it's none of your business. I don't even have to check with my seller. It's none of your business. Present your offer and we'll evaluate it. What if I'm getting paid $1? Also none of your business, right? So those compensations have been thoroughly divided by lawsuit, by new directives, by new everything from the National Association of Realtors. And you don't have to like it, but we can lean into the things that benefit us. And in this instance, it really benefits us as listing agents. Very much so. So listen, here's how you know if you're maybe not, in my opinion, not doing it correctly. If you see, like if I saw a listing come across my desk and I saw 2.5 and 2.5 for a listing fee and 2.5 for a buyer's agent fee, I would say, you just negotiated 5% fee, didn't you? And you split it. I don't think you should be doing that. It's a disservice for yourself. And also, I'll also say this. If you ask your seller who should get paid more, me or the listing agent or the buyer's agent, not that you would ask that question, but if you did, they would always say you. I know you. I trust you. I would pay you more. I don't care about what the buyer's agent gets paid. I hope I pay them the least amount of possible to get the maximum outcome I possibly can. That's the service to your seller. So that's a bit soapboxy. I probably maybe leaned down to that slightly too hard, but whatever. Okay, anybody have any additional comment on that? I do want to do sort of a paragraph by paragraph review of our listing agreement because we only do it about once a year. And oh, by the way, I will tell you, I've been preaching Notebook LM for like 2 weeks now. It's just on my mind. And now I get to see, because I can put YouTube videos into Notebook LM, and Notebook LM analyzes it and lets me know what I talk about. So I'm like, I talk about the same things all the time. I get to actually go back and ask a Notebook LM, when was the last time I reviewed the listing agreement? And I know it's been more than a year since we've reviewed the listing agreement. Linda says, oh, hey, the Linda Larsa rule is in full effect. I do remember the Linda Larsa rule, and I'll repeat it for you. If your clients are thinking about buying new construction, make sure your compensation is up to 4%, because lots of new construction offers 4% compensation. Thank you, Linda. So anyway, if you're not using Notebook LM, I highly encourage you to go check it out and use it. It's, in my opinion, the best AI tool that exists. It's a Google product. Not that that matters. Okay, let's review this document, and then we can feel good about ourselves. Well, I don't know that that'll do it. I think I need more than that. Anyway, here we go. We already read the brokerage compensation fee. I'm going to spend 2 seconds on our $195 brokerage fee. A lot of you will go, what are we even charging that for? What is that going on? Listen, I think brokerage ride, our perception is that we don't want you to skip this. We don't want you to gloss over it. We want you to cover it because it's part of the listing agreement. And so, don't just gloss over it. If someone asks a question, I think our answer would be something along the lines of, we are required to maintain all these documentations for the next 8 years, 7 years. Can't remember which number, but for several years, 7 or 8 years, and that's sort of part of the fee that helps cover the storage, and so whenever you reach out to us, we can handle that. That's where those things sprouted up, and that's what that things cover. So we want you to make sure that you are pointing that out and explaining it to it. If they absolutely refuse to pay that fee, and you've presented it to them, I feel like your individual broker will waive that for you if you at least present it and explain it and defend it one time, and then we'll waive that fee for you. But if you're not talking about it, and then just at the end of the closing, there's no fee on the PC MLS. I don't know that I know what you're talking about because I'm not back there. So you're saying Wasatch Back doesn't have the fee? We do? Okay. So anyway, that's what that is. And, present it, people push back, we waive that. That's just kind of as simple as that. Not to mention VA loans, you can't do that anyway. So anyway, there have you. Here we go. Let's go to unrepresented buyer. If the buyer is not represented by a buyer representative in connection with the buyer's purchase of the property, and the buyer has executed an unrepresented buyer disclosure, and the seller's agent, with the consent of the seller, as reflected on the unrepresented buyer disclosure and for the benefit of the seller, assists the buyer in completing the transaction, the seller has negotiated with and agrees to pay the company an additional brokerage fee in the amount of the gross acquisition price. I have seen this a few times where people are sort of like adding those together, and some of these fees are like gargantuan because we're doing the math and they're not right. Each of these fees is in addition to the seller's brokerage compensation fee. Actually, what I'm seeing the most of, people are putting the total fee that the seller is expected to pay in the seller's brokerage fee. So it's like 6 and then 2, and the buyer's compensation adds up to like 11%. And I know we're not charging them at closing those amounts, but that's how the contract would read. So be aware those are individual and they all add together. So that's unrepresented buyer. I feel like agents should be very comfortable negotiating an additional fee for that. It is additional work. It is additional risk. like if you've done it, you absolutely know it's additional work. You have to do some serious hand holding. You've got to deflect questions which you can't answer and determine which questions you can't answer. It's an awkward position. Get compensated for it. In addition to, same goes for limited agency. If the buyer also desires to be represented by seller's agent in connection with the buyer's purchase of the property, and the buyer and the seller have executed a limited agency consent agreement, the seller has negotiated with and agrees to pay the company an additional brokerage fee in the amount of X of the gross acquisition price. Okay, this shall automatically be added to and become part of the brokerage fee. People do ask, am I personally okay with limited agency? Most of the time. There are times when I would say I'm not comfortable with it. If you have fairly green real estate people who have never done a transaction, or this would be their first time selling a home, and they're not really, you don't sense that they really understand the limitations that you're about to enter into, maybe don't do it. If you represent a really savvy seller and there's a first time buyer, and that's an awkward position to be in. I think the awareness and real estate education level of the people involved should be considered, in my own personal opinion. I just did my, Scott says, I just did my first, but it was vacant for a very low price. That should absolutely be illegal, and many realtors would agree. Many would agree. I would not be one of them. But many would agree. I mean, there's definitely an argument for it being not okay. There's a solid argument for it. I will say, though, that in other states have different perceptions of what that is, and some states have like transactional brokers in certain situations, and ours is limited, and we can only pass certain information back and forth. In my career, because I grew up in the commercial world, very common, but and I would say a huge portion of my transactions were limited. The big difference being that the vast majority of my clients were very savvy investors and real estate people and had attorneys present. And the things that they were lacking in my services because I was limited were not meaningful. So, that's a perception. But there are plenty of people who would not benefit from you being limited. So do consider that before you consider being limited. Moving on, the brokerage fee.
Question.
Yeah, take it away.
On the unrepresented buyer and the limited agent, is the company also charging a $195 brokerage fee on those sections?
No, it's just for a single transaction. Yeah. Let's see. The brokerage fee. Unless otherwise agreed in writing by the seller and the company, shall be due and payable from the seller's proceeds. A, if a purchase, the date of recording of the closing documents for the acquisition of the property. B, if a lease, the effective date of the lease. And if an option, the date consideration for the option agreement is paid. If within the listing period or any extension to the listing period, the property is withdrawn from sale, transferred, conveyed, leased, rendered, or made unmarketable by a voluntary act of the seller without the written consent of the company, or if the sale is prevented by default of the seller, the brokerage fee shall be immediately due and payable to the company. Never seen that happen, but it's sort of a protection thing for when the worst case scenario happens. So there. Here we go into the 2.2, which as we discussed, should be maybe the last thing we negotiate. Well, I think it should be the last thing we should negotiate. 2.2, authorization to offer compensation to buyer's brokerage. The company is authorized to advertise or otherwise communicate that the seller and or the company is offering to pay a compensation to a buyer's brokerage in an amount up to, fill in the blank, of the gross acquisition price. I think we should, if we're going all caps on the following sentence, I think we should go all caps and an amount up to. I'm going to suggest that's small, but maybe an important change there. Brokerage fees are fully negotiable and are not set by law any board or association of realtors, multiple listing service, or in any manner other than between the company and the seller. That is in all caps. That's really important. But in my opinion, the amount up to is importanter, which I think it is importanter. Okay, 2.3, compensation agreement between the company and the buyer's brokerage. In the event the company agrees in a written compensation agreement to pay a buyer's brokerage, the seller agrees that the payment amount will be added to the brokerage fee referenced in section 2.1. The company may not agree to a written compensation agreement that exceeds the authorized amount in section 2.2. That is really in case we have broker-to-broker compensation agreements or any agreements outside of the contract. And thank goodness that sort of fell by the wayside. If you'll remember when we were making the transition, we didn't know what was going to happen, so we created scenarios in which, to accommodate all of those types of things. And it was kind of a little bit hectic for like 45 days, but it ironed itself out. Protection period. If within, fill in the blank, months after the termination or expiration of this listing agreement, the property is acquired by any party to whom the party was offered or shown by the company, the seller's agent, the seller, the parties represented, or another real estate agent during the listed period, or any extension of the listing period, the seller agrees to pay to the company the brokerage fee stated in section 2. Unless the seller is obligated to pay a brokerage fee on such acquisition to another brokerage based on another valid listing agreement entered into after the expiration or termination date of the listing agreement. So that last sentence basically covers people's very common question about protection period. Yeah, if you just didn't get it sold and they list with another brokerage, that last sentence basically voids this protection period. It's really for the events in which people try to be clever and say, well, your listing expires soon, let's just wait and I'll make an offer so we can avoid paying fees. That's what that's for. As well as, the protection is in there for other outside agents as well, right, to protect you from that nefarious activity. All right, moving on. Anybody have any questions thus far? Seller's warranties and disclosures. The seller warrants to the company that the individuals or entities listed above, as the seller represents all the record owners of the property. The seller warrants that the seller has marketable title and an established right to sell, lease, or exchange the property. The seller agrees to execute the necessary documents of conveyance. The seller agrees to furnish buyer with good and marketable title and to pay its settlement for a policy of title insurance in accordance with the terms of any real estate contract entered into between buyer and seller. The seller agrees to fully inform the seller's agent regarding the seller's knowledge of the condition of the property. Upon signing of this listing agreement, the seller agrees to personally complete and sign a company-approved seller's property condition disclosure form and a wire fraud alert disclosure. The seller agrees to indemnify and hold harmless the seller's agent and the company against any claims that may arise. The seller providing inaccurate or incorrect information regarding the property. The seller failing to disclose material information regarding the property, including but not limited to the condition of all the appliances, the condition of heating, plumbing, electrical fixtures, equipment, and you get it, any injuries resulting from unsafe conditions of the property. So there was actually a lot that was said there in seller's warranties and disclosures, a lot going on. Here's a couple things. One, the seller warrants that the individuals or entities listed above warrants a true record of who actually owns the property. And we have this discussion all the time about who has the right to sign on behalf of trusts and estates and LLCs or any type of entities other than individuals. And so this is part of that warranty. Because we all know that if we don't have the right people signing on this document, the document is worthless. If two people own the property and only one signs, you do not have a valid listing agreement, right? And so this is also a really good time to talk to them if you're dealing with entities other than individuals that are on title, that you see on title. This is a really good opportunity to express to them, we don't have a valid listing agreement, and if we do the purchase contract the same way, we do not have a valid purchase contract. Both of those things should give them pause about their confidence in their ability to sign for this. Okay. Anyway, moving on. These are really good things to spend some time on, agency relationships, because the public doesn't know this stuff and you should be educating them. Duties of a seller's agent. By signing this listing agreement, the seller designates the seller's agent and the principal branch broker for the company as agents for the seller to locate a buyer for the property. The seller authorizes the seller's agent or the broker to appoint another agent of the company to also represent the seller in the event the seller's agent or the broker will be unable to serve as the seller. As agents for the seller, they have fiduciary duties to the seller that include loyalty, obedience, full disclosure, confidentiality, reasonable care, and any other duties required by law. So there you have it. There's your duties as a seller's agent. Kimberly has a question about deceased member on title. Are you just asking in general how you handle that if they are deceased?
Yeah, I just don't remember who I wrote, because the woman's the only one alive, and the husband's also on the title. But when we start accepting offers, do I have them write the offer to both people? I've talked to title about this. I just don't remember. Can you remind me?
Oh, wow. So,
Who does the offer get written to?
well, we wouldn't be writing in offers until it's gone through probate and it's been successfully passed. And I would think that once it goes through there, we should be. Somebody correct me, because I'm only feeling mostly confident here. I think we should be correcting the title to reflect that. So, and so if you're saying she's still, the wife is deceased and she's still on title, I think our title company should go clear that up so that only the husband is still on title, and we shouldn't be. And if that's not the case, I think we're a little early to be doing that.
Okay, thank you. I'll get on it.
It's my understanding if there's no trust, you just file a death certificate on the property.
Oh, okay. Here we go. Natalie and Lisa just stepped in my office. Both are saying the same thing. They just need a death certificate. And by they, you mean the title company.
And if there's a trust, it describes how they need to proceed.
Thank you so much. A certified death certificate should be provided to title so it can be corrected. That's the only thing that is required to do that, and they can pull that person off title, right? So we don't need to go through. So what everybody's saying is we don't need to go through probate. We just need to provide a title company with a certificate of death, and they are removed from the title. That seems like a really easy solution to that problem.
And there should be a page on the trust that says who's in charge of that property. I can't remember the correct terms, but there should be a page that assigns the person when that other person passes away.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It's just like a one-page thing.
Yeah. So we do that before going live, I hear. Yeah, I don't think you should go live until that's been resolved, because it's just too messy to handle in between. Natalie says that's why they use joint tenancy. Exactly. Thank you, Natalie. Natalie's on point there. Yeah, as a reminder, joint tenancy, if one person dies, the other person automatically gets it all. Raquel says, I asked title who they need to sign when there is a trust. I also give title a copy of the trust. Very well. When you ask for PR, get them the death certificate. There you go. You'll need to have the title corrected when accepting offers. Yeah, I think anything before then is premature. So let's get, your title should be clear, and the people signing should be present and all that stuff. So there you have it. There you have it. I mean, honestly, if there is any confusion, we really should be leaning on our title people, because they're the ones that are going to ensure the transaction. So it's in there. They're the ones that have the most, the expertise to underwrite the people who are signing, so to speak. So there you have it. Thank you, everyone, for your contributions there. Okay, anybody? Moving on. It's 1:43. Duties of a limited agent. We're going to talk about that, professional advice, and then we may bail. And cover the single party compensation agreement real quick. Duties of a limited agent. The seller understands that the seller's agent and the broker may now or in the future be agents for a buyer who may wish to negotiate a purchase of the property. Then the seller's agent and the broker may be acting as limited agents, representing both the seller and buyer at the same time. A limited agent has fiduciary duties to both the seller and the buyer as required by law. However, some of those duties are limited because the agent cannot provide to both parties undivided loyalty, confidentiality, and disclosure. For this reason, the limited agent is bound by a further duty of neutrality. Being neutral, the limited agent may not disclose to either party information likely to weaken the bargaining position of the other. For example, the highest price the buyer will offer or the lowest price the seller will accept. However, the limited agent will be required to disclose information given to the agent in confidence by the other party. If failure to disclose such information would be a material misrepresentation regarding the property or regarding the ability of the parties to fulfill their obligation. The seller is advised that neither the seller nor the buyer is required to accept a limited agency situation in the company, and each party is entitled to be represented by its own agent. In the event a limited agency situation arises, the seller's agent and the broker, as applicable, may only act as limited agents based on a separate limited agency consent agreement signed by the seller. I think we all agree, and we all do this, but I'll mention it anyway. We should have this conversation before this goes live. We're either doing it in certain instances or we're not doing it, and so we know how to handle when it comes up. And if we already know how to handle it, we already know who we're going to refer it to, yada, yada, yada. So there you go. Any questions on that? Okay, moving on. Professional advice. This is, we talk about this all the time, but this is a reaffirmation of who we are and what we're actually telling our clients that we're professionals at. Might surprise some of us. The company and the seller's agents are trained in the marketing of real estate. Neither the company nor its agents are trained or licensed to provide the seller or any prospective buyer with legal or tax advice or with technical advice regarding the physical condition of the property. The seller is advised not to rely on the company or any agents of the company for a determination regarding the physical or legal condition of the property. If the seller desires advice regarding past or present compliance with zoning and building code requirements, legal or tax matters, the physical condition of the property, the listing agreement, or any transaction for the acquisition of the property, the seller's agent or the company strongly recommend that the seller obtain such independent advice. If the seller fails to do so, the seller is acting contrary to the advice of the company. Any recommendations for third-party services made by the company, the seller's agent, do not guarantee that the seller's satisfaction in the use of those third-party services and should not be seen as a warranty of any kind as to the level of service that will be provided by the third parties. The seller is advised that it is up to the seller and the seller's sole discretion to choose third-party services that meet the needs of the seller and not rely on any recommendations given by the companies or the seller's agent. So at 146, let's talk about that for a second. How do you feel about being professionals in only the marketing of real estate? How does it make you feel? I mean, I personally, if someone were to, well, let's just say this. If I had to go up and somebody like in front of, I don't know, a group of sixth graders on, work day, whatever that day is where you go and tell people what you do for a living. And the only thing I could say is I'm a professional at marketing real estate. I would feel like I was betraying myself a little bit, though it would be the most accurate thing I could say. Because there is, in my opinion, a little bit of conflict here because we give advice on pricing, right? We gather data. We gather data from a website and tell them, and we compile all that data and we make recommendations based on our market knowledge, right? So who has better real estate market knowledge? We could pinpoint who has the best like in certain neighborhoods, there's probably one or two people on the whole planet in certain neighborhoods that have the best market knowledge of a specific neighborhood. They're experts. If they're not an expert, nobody's an expert on that particular market and sales prices, right? So I feel like we do have some claim to that, but the bottom line is the only warranties we're expressing here are that we're experts in marketing real estate. If that's the case, and we're not doing full-fledged listing presentations that go into depth about how we market real estate and why it's important and who will see it, we're not living up to the guarantee of our listing agreement. Okay? If we solely focus on the services that we provide and it doesn't include a robust description of our marketing efforts, I think we're not living up to the exact documents we're hoping to get signed. So just keep that in mind. At 149, I want to talk a little bit about. Let's cover. I'm going to switch gears a little bit, and I'm going to use a recent example of a phone call I got on a situation, and I want to give some people some perspective, give them some options as it pertains to. Well, I'm going to do it if the thing pops up. There it goes. Okay. So everybody will see this and instantly recognize it because the name is at the top. The short-term leaseback addendum. And, we should be using this document when the seller wishes to occupy the property beyond closing. And, I feel like, and a common question is, well, what is the dividing line between the possession date that we put in there, like how many days after closing, and, throwing in a short-term leaseback addendum. I don't know what that is. Maybe the context of that situation might be more important. But, if they want to do 5 or 6 days, okay, we begrudgingly say okay. But on the 6th or the 7th day, we say we want a short-term leaseback addendum. Okay. And I would also encourage you to if someone wants time to go beyond closing, you as the buyer's agent should have really good knowledge about why they're asking for it. Okay? Because if they have what you perceive to be really achievable goals to accomplish within the closing deadline and the possession deadline, if you think they have achievable goals, well, maybe we can agree to that. But if they have a goal of, well, the seller doesn't get back from vacation until settlement deadline, at which point they're going to pack their entire house up, so they need 2 days. And then you do some quick math and you go, well, that's a 4,000 square foot home that is packed to the gills with 50 years worth of personal belongings. I don't think they're going to be able to do that, right? That's kind of the picture I'm painting for you. Make sure you understand before you agree to this about what their plan is and just make your own assessment about how achievable that is. Irregardless of that. By the way, I know it's not a word, and I know the other one isn't a word too, just so you know. I just try to be funny. The one thing I want to point out here is there's other options to the short-term leaseback addendum and extended possession dates. And those other options are we just don't close. And I did have a conversation with another agent, and the conversation went like, we could actually just sign a lease agreement for a couple of months. Or we could just not close for a couple of months. What say you? And I'm not even going to cover. I want to have a conversation about this scenario, and because we do cover that document quite a bit. But let's just have sort of a bird's eye view of this scenario, because I don't think this happens as much as it should. We result to the form when we can just say we're not closing until we can actually take possession. So I'll put it to the audience. Feel free to unmute yourself or just put it in the chat. What is the benefit of let's say they need 3 weeks. Okay. We set a closing date of the 1st. They're like, no, I need to be here till the 21st. And It's up, it's in your benefit to take control of this property as the buyer's agent. We want to take control because we want this property. And let's say our people are okay with the 21st. What are the benefits of doing a rental agreement, a short-term rental agreement, and what are the benefits of just not closing? And what are the risks that are associated with each one? What say you, Berkeys? What say you? No, not all at once, please. I can't hear everybody talking when they talk over each other. Just relax. Okay, I'll just take control. The bottom line is, I think Natalie, thank you. Coming in last minute. Natalie says, money is available if you close to purchase a new property. The risk is that the people won't leave when they need to. And Steve says, I think it's better to close. Somebody gets fired from their job or any other extenuating circumstance, we're going to at least keep it under 60 days so the lender doesn't freak out. Yeah, like you've heard one side of that coin. So, which is both things that they said are absolutely true. There will be scenarios, as Natalie suggested, in which, hey, I need this cash to go complete my next purchase, and then my new construction won't be ready, and I have nowhere to go. Great. I think we understand that. And in Steve's scenario, yeah, we can't, we're not going to, if we're getting a loan, that's a really important thing to consider. Not to mention, when we don't even mention occupancy, but even if we didn't close, let's say we don't close, well, what about your rate lock? What if there's an issue with the immediacy of, are you going to accept an appraisal that's more than 60 days old? Because maybe it's 70 days old, right? I don't know. I haven't talked to a lender about this, but there could be underwriting issues with extending closing, okay? And there could be underwriting issues with, having a 59-day rental agreement, okay? But even then, let's say that you're right, Steve, we're going to keep it at least under 60 days, but what if they don't move out? And they're there for 75 days. And now you're putting something at risk there, right? So I think the flip side of this coin for not closing is we don't create a tenant. The argument for just keeping it under contract is that we're not creating a tenant. If anything happens to the property, well, we don't own it. The seller owns it. And the seller, because of our contract, has an obligation to deliver it in the same condition in which we viewed it, which means if there's a problem, you pay for it. Okay? If we close, who pays for the new HVAC unit? Oh, well, the seller didn't disclose and the seller didn't do this, and I know the buyer pays, the buyer forks out the money, and then they have to figure it out if they can go get help from the seller. I think we all know that, right? So,
Mike, you've also got insurance problems. I had this similarly happen last year where people said, hey, we needed 3 more days to get out, so we agreed. Told them at day 7, it's going to be a $3,000 deposit, and we'll kick into a short-term lease. We did not get the deposit check. They ended up staying for 2 more days after that. And then it got to be the point, well, is it worth going to small claims court to get the $3,000? So we ended up waiving on it once they finally got out of there. But there's still an issue if there's a fire, who's paying for the utilities and everything else, and all that stuff was not disclosed at that point. And
yeah. So I think, and I say this all the time, in my opinion only, the reason that real estate agents are still around and still heavily used is because of context. Okay? It's really hard to, the context on every transaction can be subtly different, and only the people who are doing it every day will notice. Okay? And only the people who are on the ground every day to help make the decisions with all the available different options and things going on and personal situations and the things that people are saying and their own personal plans, we have to put that all together and make recommendations that are in the benefit of our clients. Okay? And so this is one of those situations. And I'm not advocating for one situation or the other. I'm advocating that you consider both and apply the best scenario that fits the situation. Because as Bob just sorted out, that if we do a short-term rental agreement, we're now a landlord. That's kind of that's a problem in and of itself, right? And sometimes people just don't leave. And, knowing what I know about real estate, and if I all of a sudden turned into the most vindictive person on the planet, I just lock my doors and turn my lights off and not do anything for 3 or 4 days. Maybe a week if I was horrible, if I was a horrible, horrible person. And there's nothing they could do about it. The cops could show up and I could ignore them and not answer the door and wave at them through the window. Okay? That's the blunt reality of the situation. And so that's a problem in and of itself. And then if we don't close, my favorite real estate saying, if I could only choose one, time kills deals. And so the extended time to be under contract is of risk in and of itself. Cold feet. People change their minds. This is a big deal. We don't know if our buyer is going to change their minds, if the seller is going to change their mind, and people are willing to back out and forego earnest money type of a scenario. So my recommendation is in these situations, if it's not your traditional transaction where we're closing in 20 to 40 days and we get financing approved and our condition expires and we close a couple weeks later, and we're considering whether or not to do short-term leaseback addendums or just extend closing. If you don't know what to do, call your broker and just talk it out. What do you think? Present all the scenarios and then make your best recommendation. And of course we have to explain the pluses and minuses of each scenario, which Natalie, Steve, and Linda and Bob all laid out for us. Like there's no decision that you're going to make in a real estate transaction that's foolproof. They all have risks and they all have reward, and that's part of our job to explain that. So, does anybody have anything else to add? Anything outside of the bounds of what we've already discussed?
I have a question, Mike.
Take it away.
With regards to seller's disclosures, let's say you're buying a house that was remodeled 2 years ago when the current sellers owned it. Is it automatic that receipts and documents regarding that rehab are included in seller's disclosures, or should they be asked for separately? And not delivering those, would that be a default?
I feel like I could argue that both ways. And I would have to review, that's a pretty granular detail, and it's a good one, and it's a really good question. My argument would be, if I represented the seller, my argument would be, yes, let's do this. Why are we holding this back? It's 2 years ago. Give every receipt and every contractor you have, because there's some warranties or there's some workmanship warranties that would be potentially associated with that. And if we represent a seller and we're trying to alleviate legal liability, well, that's part of the alleviation of the legal liability, is to provide as much information as we can. And then conversely, if I was the buyer's agent, I would absolutely be asking for those if that's what they told me, especially if it's before closing, right? If we're before closing, I'm asking for that. So, yeah, I think I'll revise my answer to say, yeah, I think they should be. If you have them, if you have it, they should be. Because, I think if we just take a one-off, like, hey, I got my roof totally redone 2 years ago, you would absolutely request the invoices and the contact information and everything, because that's a really important piece of information to have. And just because it's importanter than your drywall person doesn't mean it's not important. So yeah, I think they should provide it. Whether or not they've agreed to in writing to provide it beforehand, I don't know that I could answer that definitively, but I think the spirit of it is yes, they should provide it. Did that answer your question?
Yep.
Okay. All right, anything else, folks? All right, hope to see some people at the RSL game this Saturday. Be there or be square. If you are send me a text. We'll say hi. Anyway, have a great week. Catch you next time.